Hello, I'm Cheryl Meyer, and I'm otherwise known as Cheryl M. Health Muse. And what my goal is to inspire you to lead a healthier life. So when I proposed my podcast, I proposed that we present it in two different segments. The first one is It Feels Good to Feel Good, Future-Proof Your Health, where I get to share everything I have learned to return my health back to relative wellness and to live a pain-free life in spite of the fact that I have autoimmune disease. But the second part of my podcast is this episode, and that's Tell Me Your Story, the Health Muse is in. My concept with this is it's all fine and well that you hear me tell my story, but I get a lot of, it's all fine and well that it worked for you, but it's not going to work for me. And I wanted you to hear that there are lots of people out there that have made changes in their lifestyle that have supported their health and brought them back to relative wellness. We all have a couple things in common. We all owned our own health. Whatever the doctor was suggesting we did was going on a parallel path to us making these lifestyle changes where we did things that cleaned up our toxic load. We all pay attention to our body. You'll hear jazz in the background because I want you to listen to the rhythm of your health, and I want you to pay attention to what your body is telling you. My body had been trying to tell me that I was going to topple over into toxic load for some time. I just wasn't listening. So if you clean up your lifestyle and if you listen to your body, you have a very good chance not of being deprived in any way, but returning to feeling darn good. And that's what these podcasts are really all about. So thank you for joining me. This is going to be a Tell Me Your Story, the Health Muse is in episode, and I hope you enjoy it. And I hope that we all inspire you to lead a healthier, happier life. Thank you. Welcome to another edition of Tell Me Your Story, the Health Muse is in. And I have a fabulous guest for you today that I'm very excited to talk to. Lyns Delmastro-Thomson actually got told when she was in her 20s that she had leukemia, only she didn't. So her story is kind of the opposite of mine, where I had autoimmune disease and a doctor who told me I was crazy and needed mental therapy. But the conclusions that we've come to and the things that we want all of you to do are very similar, even though we've come to them from opposite directions. So this is going to be a great conversation, and I want you to stay and listen to it because you're really going to enjoy Lynn and her perspective on health. So welcome, Lynn. I am so excited to have you here today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, which is always more intimate than me reading your bio.
Yeah, so I am a mind-body medicine practitioner, and I work primarily with women with chronic illness or who are just feeling less than their best. And I really don't believe in that label, that something has to be chronic and forever, as doctors often tell us. I believe that our bodies have a tremendous ability to heal and to make us feel better if we give them the right support. And so that's part of what I help people do, is support their body in healing. I don't heal anyone. I just help their bodies do what their bodies are brilliant at doing.
Yeah, one of my biggest surprises once I figured out I had autoimmune disease and started making significant lifestyle changes was my body really wanted to heal.
Yes.
And it was not shy about telling me what I was doing right and what I was doing wrong. Our bodies are very smart.
Yes.
So let's hear more about your story.
Yeah. So my story started when I was in my mid-20s. I had gone to grad school straight out of college, and I was in a history program pursuing a PhD. And I wasn't very happy in that time period, and then that 3 years of, being in that graduate school program, but I kept writing it off. And so kind of the meat of the story started in the summer of 2004 when I was scheduled for elective surgery. And I, did all of the pre-op blood work, and I get this phone call the night before the surgery from my surgeon. And he said, your blood work doesn't look quite right. And he said, don't panic yet, because he could tell, obviously, that was something that would cause me to panic. He said, run back over to the hospital. Sometimes there's lab errors, sometimes things happen. Let's just make sure. So I, raced back over to the hospital, and I get back home and get another phone call probably within, an hour. And he said, yeah, it's not a lab error. I can't do surgery. And didn't really leave me with much information, and I was so shocked that I didn't even know a question to ask at that point. Just, it was like, okay, no surgery. And he said, you just need to go see your primary doctor as soon as you can. So I said, okay. And I go see my primary doctor, who runs more tests. And the next thing I know, this was probably maybe 3 or 4 days later, the phone rings, and it's a doctor who I don't know. And he says, how are you feeling? And I said, well, other than being kind of freaked out because I don't think a doctor I don't know has ever called me before, I'm okay.
Yeah.
I think most people would be kind of shocked to hear, a phone call from a doctor they don't know. And he said, okay, well, if you don't have any symptoms tonight, just come meet me tomorrow at the local hospital. And again, I was so shocked. I didn't know what kind of symptoms that I should be worried about. And I think I was so shocked again, that I didn't ask any questions of well, what should I be looking out for, doctor? I just was like, okay. I spent the whole night. I don't even remember how I even slept, because I was just watching my body thinking, what am I even supposed to worry about? And made it through that night, get to the hospital. He meets me there, and he said, well, we think that you've actually clotted off the veins that drain your liver. And of course, anybody would say that doesn't sound right. That doesn't sound normal. And he said, we just don't know why. So he sent in a hematologist to try and figure out what was going on, and went through a bunch of tests at that hospital. They tried to do a bone marrow biopsy, but it was too painful because I was only given just a very local injection. And I was told by the doctor, oh, this won't really hurt. You'll just feel pressure, which was not my experience in the least. It was excruciating. And they kind of, they still had figured out, that I had clotted off the veins that drain the liver. And they were still trying to figure out the cause. And they said, but we know that you've clotted off these veins, but we've never done this procedure to open them back up. So we need to send you to a different hospital because we don't want to use you as a guinea pig. They said, that's fair enough. I'm glad. I'd like to go somewhere where they've done this before. So I got sent to a major medical center out of the area where I was living. I was living in California at the time. So I got sent up to San Francisco, and more tests, another bone marrow biopsy, which was, they actually could do that time. And finally, after it was probably about 2 weeks at this point, they came up with a diagnosis, which they said at the time was chronic myelogenous leukemia. And I lived with that diagnosis for 3 years, was treated for that diagnosis for 3 years. And the whole 3 years, I didn't feel like I was getting better. I actually was getting worse. I lost a ton of weight. I was very skin and bones at one point. And I kept asking the question, you keep saying these labs look better. Why am I actually declining? And nobody really was giving me any answers. And I kept trying to see a different hematologist than that first guy who said, oh, this is just going to be a little bit of pressure, who I did not like, and couldn't get a different hematologist because I needed a referral. As most of us know in the US, you need a referral to a specialist. My primary doctor had gone to medical school with this guy, so he had a high opinion of this doctor. And he said, oh, he's the best in town. Because I kept saying, can I go see someone else? And he was like, no, he's the best. So it was only 3 years later when I left my graduate school program, because I had student health insurance and I got different health insurance because I got a job, that I was able to get a different doctor. a different primary doctor who I said on that first visit to, I said, I need a different hematologist. Please send me to somebody different. And she said, sure, here's a referral. Go see this guy. And in that very first appointment with the new hematologist, he questioned the diagnosis. He said, I don't think you have CML. I think it's something different.
What a blessing. I'm sorry that you had to go through all those years to finally get to him.
Yes.
But yeah, they think they're the who's head of the greatest magnitude, which is an old retail term that I learned. They're not the who's head of the greatest magnitude, and they don't live in our bodies.
Exactly.
So lesson number one for anybody listening is don't be afraid to question your doctor. Yes. They mean to do the best by you. I'm not saying that they don't.
Right.
But they are not God, and they don't know your body. So you have to be the person that owns your health.
Exactly.
So now you have somebody who knows that's not what you have. So now what happens?
So he said, I'm pretty sure that's not what it is. Of course, they had to do more testing to confirm, as the medical profession always relies on testing, which is important. So yet another bone marrow biopsy. And he said, yeah, I don't think it was ever that. It's a different blood disorder called polycythemia vera, which I went, okay, I've never heard of that. But it basically means producing too many of the different cell lines. So too many red cells, white cells, and platelets. So extra thick blood that can cause clotting. And so I started getting the correct treatment for that at the time. And that definitely started to improve my health. Although I had
opened up the connections to your liver.
They had done that originally the 3 years before. Yeah, I didn't kind of go into that part of the story.
Yeah, I just did 3 whole podcasts on the liver.
Yes.
So I now know just how important our livers are. So
yes.
I did what the liver does, what you can eat to support the liver, and what supplements you can take to support your
Beautiful.
liver.
Yes. I had never realized how important a liver was until the portal veins got clotted off, and I swelled up at one point because of that, because things weren't draining through the system properly. I looked like I was about 6 months pregnant because I had all this fluid in my belly, which was a very, very bizarre experience to, and people would ask me at a certain point, like, oh, how far along are you? I'm like, I'm not pregnant.
No, but that also, it was dangerous.
And exactly.
When your liver is unhappy, your whole body doesn't function correctly. So
exactly. Yeah. You can't process out all of the toxins that you need and just all of the different functions that the liver does. So, but the liver is so amazing too and adaptable, because mine has shifted. So, the lobe that's normally the smaller of the two has become the bigger of the two, and the other one actually decreased in size. It was kind of like an adaptation through that time period. And sometimes when they do an ultrasound, the ultrasound tech gets a little confused because it's like, this doesn't look quite like what I'm used to seeing.
But yeah, no, the liver can completely regenerate. It's amazing.
Exactly. It is super amazing. And for that, I was super grateful of the, adaptability and the regenerative power. Now when I have my liver labs done, everything is in normal range, where at a certain point, those numbers were very elevated.
Yeah, I'm not that lucky. I still have fatty liver, but I have been making huge strides to a healthy liver. And my problem was that I had Epstein-Barr. I had mono in my 20s, really severely. I had jaundice, and the only pain count killer that I ever took was Tylenol. And the two combined did all kinds of havoc on my liver. Who knew? I had no idea.
Of course not at that time, where, you would have done some things differently, but you didn't know.
Right. But my doctor was dancing a little party with my last labs, because I'm starting to take giant steps in the right direction. Nice. With my liver. So it's great. And that's from diet. So, okay. So now we have a healthy liver, but you have a new disease that you have to deal with.
Yes. And in that time window, before I even got the correct diagnosis, that was when I started actually exploring other avenues of, how to help myself, because I kept getting doctors who wouldn't listen to me. And I said, well, I've got to do something. First of all, I was just like crazy, anxious, and stressed out, and I didn't know how to manage any of that. So, I started finding ways to address that. And then I just started getting curious about other avenues of, health and ways to help my body heal. But, then getting the correct diagnosis, going off a medication that I did not need to be on, that actually was, horrible with side effects of, it was basically in essence chemo in a pill. So I had lots of nausea and difficulty, keeping my meals down and all sorts of unpleasant side effects, to a medication that didn't have those side effects and actually was doing what it needed to do, and reducing all of those cell counts, and receiving therapeutic phlebotomies where they actually take off excess blood so that it thins down my blood to the appropriate level. Was like, wow, I feel so much better. I have actual energy. I'm not, I started regaining some of the weight that I had lost when I was just wasting away. And just, that I definitely feel like that doctor was part of saving my life by actually listening to me and taking a moment. He didn't do one of those 5-minute visits. I brought in a stack of labs that were like 2 inches thick, and he flipped through them in that room with me. And he that was where the question came from, was like, I don't think this doesn't add up to me. He said it's not like this clotting of the portal veins of the liver has never been correlated with chronic myelogenous leukemia. It's usually correlated with this other blood disorder. So, he kind of went, this doesn't really make sense. Whereas everybody else was operating in that, like, oh, this is already the label, so we're just going to fit everything through that lens, and just, the evidence all now has to fit that diagnosis, instead of like, well, what if the diagnosis was wrong?
And the moral of the story is, if you don't feel intuitively that what the doctor is recommending for your body, don't be afraid to do some of your own research and go back and have robust conversations, or seek a second opinion from another practitioner.
Exactly.
You
Yeah.
have the right to control your own body, and you have options.
Yes.
So follow your intuition, because it could very well be true.
Yes. Yeah. My intuition was definitely telling me in those 3 years. My challenge was just getting the ability to be heard,
Right.
I think now, the person that I am now, I wouldn't have taken no for an answer with the request for a referral, but someone.
We're trained that
Exactly. And
yeah.
I was in my 20s, this was my first experience of anything like that, so I didn't know how to just basically say, no, I will not leave your office until you give me a referral to someone else. It's my right to have a second opinion.
So, but you ended up with the right guy. So
Yes.
You had an angel's hand on your back, and I'm so glad.
Yes, I am too.
And you started feeling better right away. So how long did it take before your body came back to a general wellness state?
I would say it was probably, it over the course of a year, things definitely improved. I had kind of a complicating hiccup in that time period. When I got the right diagnosis, they actually had found that I had a nodule on my thyroid. And so I had to go through having my thyroid removed. And so that kind of slowed down my progression a bit.
That had its own downside, because we need our thyroid too.
Right. Yeah. And I went through this period where the endocrinologist and the hematologist were both going back and forth of, are we going to give her radioactive iodine? Are we not? And so they said, well, we're not going to start you on thyroid replacement because we're trying to decide this. And it was like, I think there was about a month or 6 weeks where I had no thyroid hormone, because I had no thyroid and no medication for that. And it was like, I would get winded walking, 50 feet to the bathroom, and what was I at that point? 27. So crazy.
Terrible.
but once that part kind of got sorted out and I was on thyroid replacement medication, then kind of the healing started to accelerate. And in fact, I was able to start another program, a master's program in psychology, shortly thereafter. So I had recovered enough that I was like, I can actually dive into pursuing this path that had kind of found me in this whole process.
Now, what kind of lifestyle changes did you make during this period to support your body?
So I think one of the biggest things was just, first of all, learning to manage stress. So I found at the time, huge, it's huge for everyone. We all have stress in our lives. And I went back to something called biofeedback, which I had experienced when I was 12. And my pediatrician had sent me to a biofeedback person because I got horrific migraines. And so I went back to that and to learn how to basically calm my own nervous system down, because after that diagnosis, you can imagine I was just a wreck. My whole life had been flipped upside down. I was anxious. I didn't feel any sense of control over anything, really. And so that was the first thing, was just learning how to have tools for myself. Like, oh, I'm feeling anxious. How can I learn how to take some deep breaths and actually, rebalance and re-regulate my system?
Right.
And then starting to find ways, the other thing was I didn't have a whole lot of energy at the time. I had been pretty active most of my life. I wasn't somebody that was exercise averse, but I was pretty fatigued in that time window.
Well, your hormones were off. There were so many things off in your body. I'm not surprised you were fatigued.
Right. Yeah. And at that point, when I had lost all of the weight, I was just pretty weak and, not healthy. And so I started actually going to a yoga class that was called Yoga for Healing. And it was very gentle, restorative work. So it was funny. The person who had sent me to it was a therapist. And I said, are you crazy? You're sending me to a yoga class. I was like, I think yoga, my impression at that time was I had seen it in a gym, and I say, would see these people doing things like plank and, doing headstands. And I was like, you've got to be nuts, lady. I'm sick. And she said, no, this is not what you're picturing.
Yoga is a great way to release stress, especially gentle yoga. There are many different kinds.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But I had no idea.
I actually started doing a Dao form, a Korean Dao form of yoga.
Cool.
Which, when I met my husband, who I married 6 years ago, he came with me. So we started practicing. And that's one reason we ended up in Sedona, because that group has a 150-acre retreat just outside of Sedona. And my husband still takes lots of meditation and exercise classes. They even do it virtually now. So he does morning classes when he's not out at the center.
Wonderful.
So it's great because we learned how to breathe,
yes,
and how to relax through the gentle yoga that we were taking through this group.
Yes. And I think the other thing for me that class taught me was how to have a different relationship with my body at a time when I was like very feeling not at home in my body. There was a time period where I almost felt like my body was the enemy, like it had betrayed me, like how dare this all happen? And in those classes, I kind of, in the quietness and in some of the language and in the prompting, it was like, oh, wow, my body really didn't betray me. It did the best it could. And I actually started to realize I hadn't been listening to it before all of this happened. I had been so unhappy, and I allowed myself to just write it off as, well, you're pursuing a PhD. It's supposed to be hard and it's supposed to be miserable. And, you're not supposed to be a happy person as a grad student. Crazy belief system.
I read a quote that said that symptoms are actually your friend.
Yes.
You have to look at them differently. Symptoms are your body's way of communicating with you.
Exactly.
And so you have to listen to your symptoms, because you don't want your body to be screaming at you. You want to hear it when it's a gentle symptom.
Exactly.
I waited until I absolutely was totally interrupted.
Exactly.
I couldn't get out of bed. So my body was screaming at me because I had missed all the signs.
Yep, mine did too.
Whatever symptoms you have, anybody listening out there, I want you to pay attention to them, because that's your body's way of saying, hey, pay attention to me. because
Yes.
something's not right and you have the power to fix it.
Yes.
So, okay, back to you.
Yes. No, that's definitely, I like that you share that, because that's one of the things I love to share with people too. It's just, you know, it would be more convenient if our bodies had words, but they don't.
But
So
our bodies are very smart.
yes.
So they do want to talk to us.
Exactly. It's just a matter of like learning that process of how do we listen to the symptoms, and we're so conditioned too, I think, in our society. I mean, I've read statistics of, what was it, like 72% of people at the first symptom will take an over-the-counter medication in
Yep.
the US. It was mind-boggling to me that, you know, it's like, oh, well, I have a headache, I just better go get an aspirin or a Tylenol or.
And we're brought up that way. I now take
Yep.
no over-the-counter medication at all. I do take some supplements that work better for me than over-the-counter
Right.
Like I take curcumin for pain.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the problems with my body was I took so much Tylenol.
Yes.
My body absolutely couldn't handle it.
Exactly. Yeah. It's Tylenol
Yeah.
is so hard on the liver, especially. And, you know, we're not really taught that. We're just,
No.
you know, it's
And
like, oh,
way worse to the body and the liver than we ever knew. They're just discovering how bad it is.
right.
But I'm a boomer. So we've been conditioned that there's a magic pill.
Right.
And there is no magic pill.
Nope. Nope.
The
We have to
magic pill
become
is
our own
Yes.
magic pills for ourselves. We have to learn the ways to support our bodies and not rely on that outside, you know, just reach
Right.
for a symptom or
So
reach
stop
for a pill.
looking for the magic pill because you have the power to be your own.
Yes. Yes, for sure.
So now you've taken yoga. Did you change how you were eating at all?
I think at that point I wasn't as aware of diet. Over the years, I've become way more informed and educated about diet. But in that time window, I wasn't particularly educated. I was never like a person that ate a ton of fast food. You know, I would eat occasionally Taco Bell, but not, you know, somebody that ate fast food every day. Did eat some processed foods, you know, as is common in our culture. And now it's like I
the standard American diet.
exactly. And I grew up in, you know, Idaho. So it was like I didn't know there was such a thing as organic or, you know, all of those things. And now I'm, you know, even more educated and, you know, even now I keep reading things and I'm like, oh, well, now I don't even want to have that. And I don't want to have that.
Right.
So the more we know, definitely, the more we can be informed of
work and process.
exactly. So, you know, I think for me, the beginning parts were just more kind of supporting my body with, you know, just taking care of it, self-care. And then I started seeing an acupuncturist in that time window as well. And so got to experience a little bit of, you know, just the support of acupuncture plus some supplements and some herbs that supported my body in that way as well.
Did they ever figure out why your blood got so thick and what to do about that?
So it was because of the polycythemia vera that makes your blood really thick. And there, you know, there is a medication that helps to keep down the cell counts, as well as, you know, doing what they call a therapeutic phlebotomy. So you go in and they draw off a bag of blood and then they just dispose of it, because unfortunately, you know, it always makes me sad when they do it, because I'm like, there's so many cells in it that, you know, there's people in that same room getting infusions of red cells, but mine isn't usable in that way for people.
Yours has the condition attached.
Right, exactly. But, you know, even just that, I mean, probably, you know, if I was really into just going that route, could be one way of just addressing it even without medications. But it's hard on the veins to have that done, you know, constantly. And so I'm also trying to balance preserving veins, and I don't really want to go the route of having to have like a port put in or anything like that. So
and with what you're doing, it sounds like that may not be necessary.
no, I don't think it is. You know, I'm pretty careful with my veins and try to minimize, you know, the amount of times that they're getting kind of scarred up with, you know, being blood draws and with IVs being put in. And I think a doctor said like over 10 years ago, or maybe around 10 years ago, oh, we might want to do a port on you. And I was like, I don't want it. I'm going to avoid it. And it's been 10 years and I haven't needed it.
And that's another thing I want to just point out to everybody. They're going to make a lot of suggestions that will give you choices, but get involved with your health and research what alternatives are and ask your doctor.
Yes.
What are the alternatives that you can do to save yourself from that fate? Because there are things that we can do often that will not lead us to that other damaging thing that they want to do to us that might not be in our long-term best interests.
Right.
So, don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to challenge your healthcare practitioner, and don't be afraid to do your own research so that you get some of the answers so you know where you're going when you ask the questions.
Yes, I 100% agree. I think, the more informed we can be, the better advocates we can be for ourselves and, or potentially for a loved one too, going through a process.
Right. I actually learned to do some of this when my mother got a very rare disease. I got into the internet was new. I got into medical journals and I knew more than my mother's practitioner knew. And he wanted to give her blood pressure medication. And I said, do me a favor and stand her up, because if her blood pressure drops to nothing, then we don't want to do that. And he looked at me and said, who's the doctor in this room? And I said, humor me. Who's the daughter? I said, I might not be right, but I want to partner with you on my mother's health. Nobody's going to care about her the way that I am. So he stood her up, and I'll be darned, her blood pressure dropped to nothing. He turned white as a ghost. And so in the beginning, he was none too happy to see me go to appointments with her. But when she died 10 years after she should have from this disease, he called me and said, I wish everyone had a daughter like you.
That's wonderful.
So
you could be there.
Me that it's okay to question. It's okay to speak up. It's okay to do research. And I did it because I loved her and I wanted the best for her. But do that for yourself as well. And everybody needs a health advocate. Boy, for all the times I was in and out of the hospital with her, they see too many people. They're not, whoever the patient is, whether you're a loved one or you, they can't possibly give you the attention that you would. So don't be afraid to research and speak up. It's important.
Yes, I 100% agree. I do that with my husband as well. He deals with certain health issues and, sometimes his memory isn't the greatest. And I think one time we were in an appointment and the medical assistant seemed kind of irritated, like that I was there, thinking I was just being meddlesome. And I said, he doesn't remember things sometimes. Like he won't remember, or he'll go home and then he won't remember something that was shared that was important. It's like, I am here to also help, tell you things he might forget and then help him remember if he needs that prompting.
Yeah, and they're not used to having somebody who is that involved.
Right.
But it's important that you get that involved and they get trained.
Yes.
As I said, he called me and thanked me. Your doctor will get trained and your nurses will get trained to be grateful for your input as well.
Yes. Yeah. And that doctor in my story, the primary doctor who kept pushing me to, stay with that hematologist, I did eventually, from him, I did get an apology later that, when he found out everything that had happened and he said, I was wrong. I should have sent you somewhere else.
See, fantastic. So that's another reason I want everybody out there to speak up.
Yes.
So, yep. Okay. So continue on. Sorry, I keep interrupting, but I want to make sure everybody gets sort of the big takeaways here.
Yeah, definitely. So, that was through that whole experience was how I found kind of a passion for other approaches to health and healing. I came to realize, if I wanted to get well, that it was really going to take a lot from my own ability, my own intentions and my own focus and learning and, finding other solutions than just listening to, oh, well, here's the medication and that's it. And, and that's one of the things I'm super passionate about is just the idea that, you know, there's more to health and healing than taking a pill or a surgery. Like just because those are the only two main, you know, tools in that toolbox for doctors in the medical system, it doesn't mean those are the only two things that exist.
Yeah, no, there's actually quite a few things.
Yes,
It's
exactly.
your mindset and how you manifest and how you relax and how you deal with your body and how you do self-care and certainly how you eat, which has become a big focus of mine to get people to stop eating the standard American diet.
Yes.
And I've now coined that I want people to eat the GLAD diet, the green living diet, because you really, food is medicine. So
It
if you
is.
eat right, you can start to heal yourself that way as well. But there are lots of there are many pillars to health.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so don't give up
No.
until you have explored them all. I just read a quote by Edison that when you think you've done everything, trust me, you haven't. Because
Yes.
that's true. And it's especially true with your health.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah. For me, it was kind of like I got very curious at a certain point, and I just became somebody that started saying yes to, you know, when something new would cross my path and it sounded interesting and there was, you know, some, you know, reasoning behind why it would help me. It was like, oh, well, you know, let's try acupuncture.
Right.
I mean, it's existed for thousands of years. It must actually do something.
And the UCLA Pain Clinic uses acupuncture as their #1 healing modality.
That's awesome.
And they're known as one of the finest hospitals in the country. So if you haven't tried that, that's an excellent way for you to get additional healing.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's, you know, it's very gentle. And I've even used it. I had to use it once when I was going to have a tooth filled, and I had problems with when the dentist tried to do the filling, and he, you know, did the Novocaine at first, and my jaw locked up and I was having some jaw issues, and he said, we can't do it today. You know, I don't want to strain your jaw, which I was glad again that he listened to that. Mm-hmm. And he said, we're going to have to do it, you know, probably without anything. And of course, that's the last thing you really want to hear is, you know, oh, I'm going to have a tooth drilled and, you know, nothing. And I talked to an acupuncturist I knew, and he said, come for a treatment. And I felt nothing when the dentist drilled my tooth. It was, the dentist was shocked too, you know, at how that worked. To just, you know, there was no pain. He said, maybe I should get this guy's information and send my patients to him.
But I love it when doctors who don't know about these things hear my story or hear your story, and then their whole awareness is opened up and they start thinking about other possibilities. Because yes, our conventional doctors don't learn any of this in medical school.
No. I think I read somewhere that they spend maybe one day talking about nutrition, one day.
Sometimes it's half a day. And it's because I didn't know any of this. When I started researching, medical schools were started by pharmaceutical companies. And they are still very significantly influenced by pharmaceutical companies. So, and it can take, if there's something new that's discovered, it can take as many as 15 years before it hits your practitioner's medical journal. And his #1 source of information is his pharmaceutical rep. Yep. So that's why they listen for the first symptom. And then down the chute comes the pill, because that's what they know. Right. And that's not a bad thing necessarily, but that does mean that you have to be involved in your own health.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I definitely am not, you know, anti-medication. There are several that I take that, you know, I feel are necessary because, you know, with the clotting disorder, you want to make sure that you don't get blood clots. With no thyroid, I couldn't live without something to replace thyroid hormone. I would not be able to function. But you know, my goal is always as little as possible. You know, if there's another solution, then I would rather go that route. And that tends to be.
And the beauty of the other routes is that they don't take away at all from what conventional medicine is recommending.
Exactly.
All the other modalities could make significant improvements in your health and work complementary with conventional medicine, which is another good reason for you to keep exploring what other things are out there, because many of them are extremely useful and leading you back to health.
I agree 100%. I wish it could be seen, in that way by many in the medical profession, that this is just an additional complement to what they do, instead of,
Right.
some doctors get bent out of shape by you're doing what?
And I think they think that it means we're not going to need them anymore. And I think we're always going to need them.
Right. Especially with certain things, it's like I always say, if you're having a heart attack or something like that, you want to be able to have a hospital to go to. You don't want to call someone like me and say, can you do an energy session on me? No, go to the emergency room.
Yeah, I'm a huge believer in functional medicine. That was what actually saved my life. But it took me 3 years before I ended up with my own functional practitioner. And I would like to think that that's the future of medicine in the United States. But my doctor went to Yale. She's a full-fledged MD.
Mm-hmm.
And she went on for functional medicine because she got sick and couldn't help herself. And of all the doctors I listened to in those 19 symposiums, when I first started looking for answers, they all went to get additional training because they got sick and couldn't help themselves.
Interesting.
But the beauty of functional medicine is, although she can prescribe pills, and that is a tool in her toolbox, we start with the holistic approach first.
Yes.
So I'm still having a problem with my cortisol level and fatigue, but what I'm taking are flower Ayurvedic drops of Rhodelia, because that works as well for me as the medication would work. So we start with the holistic approach, and if that doesn't work, then we might end up with the medication. But that's the beauty of functional.
Yes.
But there's not as much money in that, honey, as there is in the connection between conventional and drugs.
Right.
So don't be afraid to explore more. And the other problem with most functional practitioners is they don't take insurance.
I was just going to say that. Yeah. And they can be hard to find too. I know sometimes people are looking.
Now you can actually go to ifm.org, and all of the people who've gone through the Functional Medicine Academy, whether they're naturopaths or they're medical doctors or they're nurse practitioners, they're all in there.
Oh,
but cool. And mine does take PPO insurance, and she does take Medicare, but most of them do not. I literally called 50 doctors in the Los Angeles area, and I drive over an hour to see her, and wow, is she worth it.
Yes.
So do your research.
Yes.
Go to ifm.org and then call everybody and see. There's 2 questions. You want to know if they practice root cause medicine, which means they're not going to look at just one malfunction in one organ. They're going to look at your whole body. And then you want to know, do they take insurance? Because if they practice root cause medicine and they take insurance, it's a completely different experience from your conventional doctor.
I'm sure it is. Yeah, I haven't seen a functional doctor, but I have a naturopath who's very good and, looking at certain things, like discovering that my B12 was low, which can add to, low energy. It's like, when has a regular doctor ever drawn that lab on me? I can't think of that. And that's a simple enough thing. You can take, that as a supplement. You can take B12 injections and
And I did interview a naturopath. So if anybody's interested in what the difference is, listen to my podcast, because he was fantastic. And they don't want to break skin. They look at how they can enhance the body through supplementation. Yes. And that's their brilliance. So if you're frustrated, they're an excellent source of additional information. So I strongly recommend that as a possible approach as well.
Yeah, that's part of why I went that route was, there was something that I said, I don't want to go the pharmaceutical route on this. I want to find a different solution. And luckily, sometimes even naturopaths can be hard to get insurance to cover, but luckily my insurance does cover her. So it's just the same copay I would pay for seeing my primary, which is nice.
And B12 is interesting because it can mimic all kinds of things in your body if they're not aware of what B12 deficiency does.
Exactly.
So the fact that he caught that had to be a giant step back towards health as well.
Exactly. Yeah. And just looking at, methylation as well was kind of one of the things that she was looking at, because that can affect a lot of different things. And,
Do you have an MTHFR? Do you know if you have that or not?
I don't know if I do. She thinks that my naturopath thinks I undermethylate, but I don't know if I actually have.
I discovered mine because on a lark, somebody gave me the 23andMe test. And so both my husband and I took it, which was fascinating unto itself because I
Sure.
learned all kinds of things about my inheritance. But there are statistics behind that test. And my functional doctor went, you got the report? I want the report. And it ends up, I inherited from both my parents the MTHR deficiency gene, which means that I don't detox. What goes in my body stays in my body because I don't methylate.
Right.
And so, and what clued her was when we were talking, I said, I think I was born allergic to Pittsburgh because I was born in Pennsylvania. She said, you might have a methylation problem. I want to see that report. And it ended up, I inherited it from both parents, and I was loaded with heavy toxic metals because at the time when I was born, I'm an old broad, there was all kinds of coal dust and steel dust in the air. And my dad was a chemist. He got me out of there at 4 because he didn't think I would grow up if we stayed in Pittsburgh. And it ended up, that was the best thing he could have done for me because both of my parents ended up dying of diseases that are related to methylation.
Wow.
I didn't know anything about it at the time that I lost the two of them. So obviously they had the gene because I got it from both of them.
Yes.
So yeah.
That's good catch. Good
catch. Lucky catch.
Yes. Yeah. Once those things are known, there's things that can be done to help.
Yeah, I take folate. It's not that hard to deal with it. I take a special supplement for MTHFR, and it has evened me out. Took me a long time to detox the heavy metals out of my body because my body didn't want to give them up, and my liver had been visibly stuffing them in my bones and my fat. So after I got all the heavy toxic metals out of my body, 2 years later, it started leaching them all back in. So I had to go through the whole detox procedure all over again. But no matter how you feel and what's going on with your body, keep researching and keep questioning because that's how you eventually come back to wellness.
Yes. Yes. And we all can be our best advocates. And there's so much that we can find on the internet too, to learn and to research.
And I'm not sure the 23andMe test, because it's been bought by a pharmaceutical company. I'm not sure that they still give you those tests, the results underneath it, but it might be worth it for you to do it because that test is not that expensive. And I bet you anything your naturopath knows how to read that report.
Yeah, I think the way she was going to look at it was you can also do a whole histamine blood test, and they can look at that as a kind of indicator as well.
Right. I have a second snip that we discovered from that test, which is the DOA snip, which means I don't process histamines well. So it's funny that she would test for that because I do think they're connected. And that means that I don't drink things like kombucha because they inflame me and give me terrible hay fever because I have this little snip in my DNA, which is,
right.
Yeah. If I were young, I'd go back and become a biochemist. I'm quite fascinated with all this stuff.
Yeah, I can tell that you're like me. You get interested and you learn more about different things.
Right. So, but it would be good if you could do that. How are you feeling today?
Definitely much better than I was in that time period. I go for therapeutic phlebotomies usually every couple months, which isn't too bad to have to do. And with all the other things that I do and with the addition of kind of the work that I do and working with a teacher and a mentor that I have to kind of heal some of the underlying pieces, I've made a lot of progress too, and in how my body handles the health challenges, and just being able to live a pretty normal,
You're very proactive, and I congratulate you for that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Tell us about your practice, and then I'll have you tell us how they can find you, because I will put it all underneath this podcast. But tell us about your practice. You went back to school. You also became a coach.
I'm actually not a coach. I'm an energy medicine practitioner.
Okay.
So I use two energy healing approaches. One is called Body Talk and one is called Body Intuitive. And both of them really look at kind of the story under the symptoms. So again, with that idea that you were saying earlier about our bodies talking to us through symptoms, we have tools within the system because sometimes you don't know what your body's trying to say. I've had times in my life where I've had a pain and I was pretty clear it feels like it's a message, but it might have as well be speaking Japanese to me, and I don't speak Japanese.
Right.
So the work can really help people to understand and translate what's going on. And we can dig into things like, traumas that have happened in your life and helping you clear the impact of that. There's support in the work for clearing toxins out of the body and helping optimize liver function. Working with epigenetics, which is really fun, like working with how our genes are getting turned on and off.
Right. And we have the ability to turn them on and off.
Yes.
Which is, one of the big questions I get asked when I get out to speak is, it's all fine and well, but I got bad genes.
Yep. It's only about 1%.
Yeah, you might have gotten bad genes, but that doesn't mean that they have to show themselves.
Yep.
You get to turn that switch on or leave it off, and it's all dependent upon your lifestyle.
Exactly. Yeah, I love the work of Bruce Lipton and how he talks about that. Just because, like, say you perhaps have been tested and you have the BRCA gene, that doesn't necessarily mean that you will get breast cancer. The lifestyle pieces can be what activates that gene, and you can keep that gene turned off and never develop into that disease.
Right. Which is, sorry for all the people who had their breasts removed because they had the gene, because newest thinking is lifestyle changes would have never let them get breast cancer in the first place.
Yes. And that's part of why that topic is I'm so passionate about, because it really shows us how much, we have control over our own health through, as we talked about, the food that we eat, lifestyle, learning to manage your stress, lower your toxin load, address old things that have happened in your past, traumas that we carry around like baggage, and, you can put the baggage down. And the body can, again, do, as we talked at the beginning, what it's brilliant at is to try and find balance and heal.
Do you talk to your body every day?
Usually I check in with my body, and especially when there's kind of something going on, when I feel a small pain or a symptom somewhere, it's like, okay, get curious, what is this trying to tell me? And listening for that answer is so important.
Get quiet. You have to ask the question, then you have to get quiet.
Yes. And you have to practice it too.
The answer, but the body is very smart.
Yes. And sometimes that takes practice too. That's something I kind of teach people, but the first time people learn to do that, you can feel very kind of like, I don't know what she's talking about, and you sit there, I'm sitting quietly. What am I supposed to hear? So
what am I listening for?
But the more you do it, the more it's like, maybe a couple of days later, if you keep doing it, your body will finally be like,
and my body's pretty loud. My body talks in terms of inflammation. Yes. So if I have pain or inflammation, since I have autoimmune disease, I am a computer that starts thinking through, what did I do yesterday? What did I do the day before? What has triggered me to be feeling this way? And what can I change right away? Because I never want to go back to where I was. Never.
Yes. Yep. The more we can make those course corrections, right? When we get the signal initially, it's like, what's off? What did I eat something that really is not the best for me? Maybe I really didn't drink a lot of water yesterday and I dehydrated myself.
Yeah, that's a biggie. Or maybe I didn't get a good night's sleep.
Yes.
Or maybe I need to be doing more breathing, because those are all part of the pillars.
Yes.
Keeps us healthy, but you have to stop and think about it, and maybe you try them all and hope that it's one of them's going to do the trick.
Yeah.
Can you do the work that you do long distance?
Yes.
You're in Oregon?
Yeah, that's I actually kind of, when everything happened last year with COVID and kind of being in Oregon with some of the shutdowns, I wasn't even able to go to my office for a period of time. And so I converted my business all to online. So I actually don't see people in person anymore because I gave up that space last year. And it's just as effective. And I always say the added benefit is you don't have to drive anywhere when you're done. Right. So if you're relaxed, you can actually just relax and enjoy, or, take a quick nap and let your body finish that healing process instead of, oh, I've got to get myself back to full consciousness and get in my car.
Yeah. But I wanted them to know that they could still hire you.
Yes, definitely.
Even though you're far away from where they may be, because this is heard in 80 countries. So somebody somewhere else might hear this and decide you're just the person that they're looking for that could help them.
Yes. Yeah. And I do work with people internationally. It's always fun to connect with people all around the world and share the power of this healing work with everyone.
And you have a wonderful gift. Tell them about the gift. I'll put it underneath the podcast, but I found it quite interesting.
Yeah. So as we were talking about kind of our bodies speaking to us through symptoms, I have a free guide that you can sign up to receive. And it talks about my process, at least, for how to start to understand, what your body is saying instead of feeling just frustrated or confused. So it's very kind of step-by-step, a few simple steps. And also it goes a little bit into like what emotions tend to be stored in which areas of the body, which can be a helpful starting place sometimes when you're like brand new to it and you go, I don't know what emotion would possibly be, in my liver. So it gives you.
Yeah, that actually was interesting in all my liver research, because that's where we hold anger.
Yes.
So different bodies tell you different things.
Exactly. Yeah, that really comes part of that from kind of Chinese medicine philosophy of like what areas are associated with emotions. And I find that just so fascinating of how the body has kind of its own filing system.
Right. Yeah, we need to give our bodies more credit, and we need to respect it more.
Yes.
So thank you for coming today. I have really enjoyed the conversation.
Me as well. I really enjoyed it too.
We're kind of on parallel paths from different points of view, and that makes us a wonderful team to talk to the public.
Yes.
So thank you. This has been a lot of fun.
Yes, I really enjoyed it.
I'll let you know when it goes live, and then we'll get it out to everybody that we both know so that they can enjoy the benefits of the conversation.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. I think you probably are the most similar in kind of what you share with people that I've come across. So it's nice to have a fellow.
Right. I talk more about food because I've decided that's the foundation where I need everybody to go first. Because if you don't change how you're eating and ditch all the toxins that are in processed food and the sugar, which is interrupting every organ in your body, then you can't build a healthy food system to support your body.
100%.
So I'm trying to concentrate on that, but my books are all on toxins. So yeah.
Both of those things, are so foundational, and people also don't realize all the ways toxins come in, like shampoos and lotions and.
Yeah. I was shocked. I had an itchy head for 20 years. Who knew it was because I was affected by the toxins in my shampoo?
Yep. Yeah. Because we all think, oh, it's regulated, right? Like we're protected.
Well, I got angry that my government wasn't protecting me.
Yes.
So my big call to action is join me. We all need to be armies of one and join together, because it's only a 5% shift. And big food, big farm, big agriculture start to change. Right. And in the 9 years since I got sick, I have started seeing there was only one cosmetic company when I started. Now there's organic cosmetics everywhere.
Right.
And that's because we all stood and said, no, we're not going to buy that stuff.
Yes.
And so we need to all own our own bodies and then join together so that we become a force together.
I agree. Yeah, that's how we get the change to happen, and get
too much money. Our politicians are never going to do it for us.
Right.
They're not. They're supporting it. Look, glyphosate last year was proven to cause cancer. They're still spraying it on our crops.
Yeah.
Bayer has paid out $80 billion to people who got cancer from glyphosate, which is Roundup, $80
Right.
billion, and they're still spraying it on our food. You know,
Yeah.
there's a missing link somewhere there with regulation and legislation, but we cannot buy that stuff. And that's how we have to approach this.
I agree 100%.
So, okay, thank you very much.
Yeah,
I'd like to stay in touch with you and keep up with what you're doing. I joined your mailing list today.
Awesome. Wonderful.
Thank you. Everybody get her freebie, because that'll get you on our mailing list, and then you'll get all kinds of great goodies.
Okay.
Thank you.